Recording now. Alrighty, so we are up and running. So this is the end of phase one. Before we started streaming, we went over the loss and grief diagram, and we talked about how it was deconstructed. We talked about status, management, recovery. I'm going to touch on some of that as we go through this process over here. Is this the first slide? I don't know if this is the first slide. I think so. Basically, the first slide looks at this lecture is called Anger Management Communication Solutions in 3D. Anger Management Communication Solutions in 3D. Communications is the key here. As a developmental and child psychiatrist, I tell you that if you don't acquire speech, you can't manage loss. You can't manage creating an intimate space for yourself and others.
Can you define intimate space?
An intimate space is a house where you can have people live with you and take care of them, and they take care of you, where your identity is maintained. So in our program, we talk a lot about the house. The house for us is a wonderful metaphor because it's an intimate space. It's a place where you can take care of yourself, you can take care of others. I mean, if you look at our program has three sections. We have a house that's under construction. It's based on Kierkegaard's understanding of aesthetics is very important. People get attracted to things and they want to build things up and so forth. And then there's a piece called moral development where you have to live in a house and you have to maintain that house. That means you have to have moral relationships with all the people in that house. And then you have to take care of the entire thing, which is called the ethical piece, which has to do with making sure that you create the structures to maintain intimate situations in, we call it, in 5 acts. We talk about intimacy in 5 acts. We don't think that human beings really understand love. It's very rare that a human being understands what love is. I mean, we talk about love all the time. I love you, I love you, I love you. It's all bullshit. Because basically, intimacy, love is hard. Intimacy is very, very hard. And again, an intimate space is a house where you can take care of other people, maintain moral standards so they can attach to you. Morality is a relationship between human beings. Ethics is a relationship between you and the community. Okay? Now, we talk about ascesis. Again, ascesis is the willful denial of one's choices, and that is essential for supporting the routines and habits of others in the beloved community. Now, routines and habits facilitate the practice of others in being and becoming. Being and becoming. It's needed for transcendency in the beloved community. Again, transcendency supports safety, support, service, and security in the community. You need this. The relationship between you and the community. Right. So that becomes very important. So ascesis is huge. Foucault's ascesis, it's one of the books that I accessed in preparing these lectures. It's very, very interesting and very important stuff. Because you don't only see ascesis being talked about by Foucault, you also have Arthur Schopenhauer talking about ascesis. And looking at will and representation in the community. So this is the crux of my entire program here. It's the essential architecture of loss and grief. And it says this: intimacy is everything. Intimacy is the only way you can overcome loss. To intimate is to communicate something about oneself to another person, thereby enhancing a discussion, a dialogue, to overcome the loss and separation that we experience in life. That is the loss and separation from God. Knowledge about something or experiencing someone at some point has to go to acceptance. You can't keep looking for knowledge and understanding. I can't keep looking at you and trying to figure out who you are all the time. And in the next slide, I'll talk about a model that I like to talk about in order to consolidate this position. Acceptance is essential to intimacy or love at the present position. Again, we talk about love, but we're actually talking about intimacy in five acts: storge, philia, eros, xenia, and agape. To support the other requires that the projected images of aesthetic intimacy of the other be understood and appreciated. Why do we like this person? Why do I like this person? Why do I feel so close to this person? Why do they move me in the way they move me? That understanding of that and appreciation of that requires the willful removal of oneself from the projected images that's pictured. And you have to remove yourself. As Key says, the removal, the denial of choice is very important, because basically, when you include yourself in a picture and you're trying to become something else, you have elements of destructiveness in that picture. And we'll talk about this in the next slide. But just at that moment, one moment where you understand someone and you appreciate them for who they are and understand the absolute beauty and how they transform you, that is the closest thing that we experience as human beings to experiencing God's love. Okay? So there are 4 questions I want us to consider before we go forward with this lecture in full. Everybody have used the Quick Start kits for electronic devices, and we find them very helpful. You know what a Quick Start kit is? What is a Quick Start kit? You get a TV, you say, plug this in here, plug this in there. My God, you're on a computer, you act like you know everything. You feel intimate to that computer. All of a sudden, you put in a Quick Start kit in place, and you think that you're a computer genius. Man,
It works.
it works. But you all of a sudden, you create an intimate space between you and the computer. So these Quick Start kits are very important. And we understand Quick Start kits. We've all had Quick Start kits. It's getting started very quickly with very limited knowledge of what the device, how it operates, and how it functions. But you just plug in here, plug in there, and by God, you're up and you're running. So this idea that you can have a Quick Start kit is very important. It goes into our construction of language. It is the equivalent of etic speech, ETIC, etic speech. You ever see kids walking around? They're talking all the time. They're blabbering all the time, and they're not saying anything. But it's a wonderful way to explore your house, to go here, to go there. You don't know what things are, but you're just blabbering. You're exploring your house. You're trying to figure out what this means, what that means, what this means. And so it's a quick way. Etic speech becomes very seductive and dangerous in a sense, but it's developmentally normal because it gives you a chance to acquire that familiarity and intimacy very quickly. It's like a Quick Start kit. It's speech. It's autonomy. You know, we always talk of autonomy as somehow movement, but autonomy is about language, being able to impact somebody by saying things to them. I love you, mommy. Mommy, I love you. Oh. Or you're saying some other statement, and they don't know what they're saying. It's like, Polly wants a quacker. I want a quacker.
Talking without saying anything.
When you ask the kid or the parent, what kind of quacker do you want? I don't know. Polly wants a quacker. It's ethic speech. It is just this, and so one of the things that I love about the current political atmosphere we're in right now is that Donald Trump, man, is a master of ethic speech. Just talking, and saying nothing. It's all about what he's trying to emote. So this then brings us to the third question, which I think is a very, very important question, and that has to do with the nature of power, because human beings are always trying to acquire power. Power is something that we all want. Power, to be sexy, to have money, to be on the rich and the famous, to be on the stars with the rich and the famous, to have this, to have that. Everybody wants power. And a lot of what we understand as power is aesthetics. It has to do with our ethic understanding of what power really means. All we know is we want to dress up nice and look fine and have people respect us and to create that intimate space that we don't necessarily earn, but we just want to be there. And unfortunately, a lot of people just stay there. They just stay there at that aesthetic space and they don't go more beyond that ethic speech. Now, again, speech, as you become more and more intimate, it goes from etic speech, ETIC speech, to eidostic speech, to eidetic speech. Eidostic speech is speech where you have a cultural imputation, where it has to take on certain meanings based on the culture that you're in. And eidetic speech, EIDETIC speech, is the speech that comes where you can visualize your memory and you can actually modify and edit how you appreciate things, you know. So after you have spent enough time making love to your favorite person, you can just sit there and smile in your face and you know exactly what you're smiling about. You have memories of that situation, or memories of a good meal, or memories of a wonderful conversation, memory of an intimate interaction you've had with somebody else. Because that memory it can be visualized, it can be edited, and it can be changed around. So power is very important, but power, I think, for most of us, is conceptualized as being destructive. That's how we view power. When we think of power, we think of nature and its destructive force. But that's not what God meant by power. At least that's, I don't think, what God meant by power. Power is about enhancing one's sense of choice and freedom. To me, I think that the most powerful thing that you can do is to create a situation where one acts in a rational way because of choice. I am doing this rationally because it's the right thing to do, it's the proper thing to do, it's the decent thing to do. It's the basis of moral sentiment, and it's going to be the basis of what I want to do in terms of, I call it my Edinburgh lecture, where I want to talk about moral sentiment and the importance of that in creating that intimate space in order to create a more beloved community. So what is the difference between existing, being, and becoming? These are terms that are philosophical terms, but at some level we're all philosophers. And language becomes very important in conveying information about a lot of things. So existing is very interesting. Existing, by definition, is being defined by others in large measures. People look at me, I'm always amazed how they view me. They never give me my true value, my full agency. And I'm always doing double takes. Did he actually do that? The other day, one of my friends came to me and she wanted me to come help her pump gas in her car. I said, okay, I'll come pump gas in your car. Okay, and so being, acceptance. Being is acceptance. Acceptance is intimacy. When I can see you as a person, simply accept you for who you are, that's being. It's moment, it's in that moment, and when somebody looks at you, they love you, there's projected aesthetic intimacy. That's the closest thing you're ever going to experience in your life as true love. That sense of just being without that person projecting their own stuff into that picture. Now, becoming becomes somewhat problematic because we're all engaging in bargaining, and becoming is about bargaining, but bargaining where you're making good choices along the way. But bargaining has elements to it that becomes very destructive at times. Because becoming requires that you engage in what I termed discursive normalization, which is just random laming things and moving around. And that's where we all started. We started off with ethics speech, which is just random, crazy movements. But that is very seductive because it gives you a sense of being part of that quick start kit. You feel intimate, you feel familiar, and people love it. Because, if you bring forth enough information, you can have a lot of people agreeing with you and believing what you're saying. Obama is not really an American. He's really not an American. He was born in Kenya. Thank you for sharing that with me. All of a sudden, confirmational bias. I feel a sense of loss, but now you're telling me stuff that I'm willing to buy into because it makes me get through what I need to get through.
But don't we do that? We're basically using addition where we can control people and get power, like you're saying, by offering something that they already know and establishing a connection. And essentially, when you have a certain amount of connections that you've made, that is where your power comes from. Whoever has the most connections, basically.
Always. I mean, that's part of the problem, because a lot of times we're in situations where people don't give us our true value because they have this confirmational bias. Pierre Bourdieu talked about each one of us has a field that we occupy, and in that field, we have capital interests where people invest in us or don't invest in us, value us or don't value us. And a lot of times you in that situation where you realize that I'm not valued here. I'm not valued here. And it's a shock to realize that you're not valued. And and those people not valuing you is they're going through their own discursive normalization where they're trying to create an intimate space for themselves, and they have to make choices. You are valuable. You are not valuable. You're valuable to me. I'm willing to give you this, or this. I'm not willing to give you that. And so you don't create an intimate space in the community at large. So part of becoming can be very destructive, and it has a lot of nihilism in it. And power unto death is a normal developmental state that has to be managed. You manage power unto death by acknowledging a relationship where there is usually a master and a slave. The master is the person who can bring death to the relationship. The slave is the one who accommodates and learns from the experience. And eventually the roles reverse, they change. And eventually it goes on to become other types of conscious understanding of where you are. The power, the master-slave relationship gives rise to stoicism, where you accept stuff, but there's no intimacy there. Stoicism is you accept stuff, but it's not a very intimate space. And then the next step, number 5, from going from there, from stoicism, you go to a place called being a skeptic or a cynic, and you kind of a wise ass. You say, okay, I'll do this, I'll do that. Yeah, right, whatever. But the highest form of conscious understanding of where you are is rational choice. It's the highest form. You know you do the right thing because that's the right thing to do. And just before then, you have the unhappy consciousness. This is all Hegelian stuff, which I find just brilliant. I mean, these guys came up with this. And these are geniuses. I'm just amazed. Anyway, we went through, before we started this broadcast, we talked about the loss and grief diagram. And we talked about the importance of a number of things. So practicing, we talk about practicing cognitive structuring. We talk about the importance of practicing and cognitive structuring in managing loss. We talk about position 1, which is the envy schizoid paranoid position versus the depressed position. So we went through a lot of this stuff. We talk about transactional agency as elegiac recovery, where your loss gives you a chance to recover and to take on features that helps you in the beloved community, where you can maintain a routine and habits, not only yourself but others. So we talked along the way. We've had lectures several months ago on mourning and melancholy. We talk about the difference. This again is a review for most of us who follow this. We talked about a type of recovery, to recovery being asymmetrical, symmetrical, or full recovery. We talk about the importance of language in phase 1 of our program. We talk about the importance of autonomy, where ambulation is important. But when we think of autonomy, we never really talk about the importance of language. But speech is very important. The first 5 program that is very common in America now, we talk about the importance of the first 5, to be able to acquire speech by age 5, because it's the only way you can manage your losses, the only way you can develop an amount of self-control, where you can participate in creating intimate spaces with other people. So language is very critical.
Did you say age 5?
Age 5 is critical. If you're not acquiring speech by age 5, you're running into problems. You're going to need facilitated care along the way. So speech by age 5 is very important. Again, we talked about the importance of speech. We talked about the importance of speech evolving to an intimate space. So we talk about etic speech, eidostic speech, eidetic speech. We talk about the importance of discursive nominalization, which is etic speech in transition. Etic speech is this meaningless speech that just emotes emotions and feelings. It's a quick start kit to a kind of a fox intimacy. You know, you think that you know stuff. It's a quick start. I have a little computer, I plug here, and all of a sudden I'm in a computer, I'm doing this, and this. So there's a sense that we have an intimate space, that we have intimate understanding, but our knowledge of the process is very limited. It's a quick start kit, but the good news is that speech goes to a place of cultural semblance, which is eidostic speech. So the bedroom becomes a place for sleep and making love. The kitchen becomes a place for sleep and making love. And also cooking. That was for you. But it's
so much fun with that one.
It's a cultural piece. And then eidetic speech is visual memory, visualizable memory, where you can edit and monitor and change things around. And it has importance to the construct of historicism, which we'll talk about later. But anyway, discursive normalization starts out of etic speech. Etic speech is it's like a quick start kit. It gives you a quick sense of intimacy. And that's why it's so important. That's why Donald Trump is so popular, because he tells people what they want to hear. And it's kind of like this discursive normalization gives you a sense that he's making sense of what he's saying.
It's just talking point.
And it's just talking point, and basically it's confirmational bias. You know, and this is the basis for my love of the Scots, basically. Scott. Because David Hume talked about the importance of being skepticism. Hegel picked up on that later when he talked about the importance of managing power unto death and going from power unto death to stoicism, and then skepticism and the unhappy consciousness, and then the final stage, which is rational consciousness, where you make decisions based on what is right. Now, the wonderful thing about this stuff that I really love is that, in our program on the essential actions for loss and grief, choice and freedom is very important. Even the choice to say that God doesn't exist is very important. And Nietzsche, free will, is very, very important. And if you go through that process, it gives you a chance to work yourself way back to a place where you understand that God does exist for most of us who understand in some ways what this process is about. In any event, the review of phase 1 continues. Again, this lecture is about ascesis, and it has to do with our final phase. Going forward, we're going to be doing some different things in order to teach the program in a different way. But identity and transactional agency becomes very important. We talk about the importance of autonomy, which requires trust, being able to initiate that intimate space and maintain that intimate space. We talk about the importance of aesthetic intimacy in order to having a relationship with other people. Relationships are based on aesthetic intimacy. And that moral space requires integrity, a consolidated, integrous identity consolidation, generativity, transcendency. Now, with transcendency in the beloved community is very important, because what transcendency subserves in the beloved community is the 4 S's: safety, service, support, and safety. Okay, so that becomes very important. Now, again, we continue with the review of phase 1. Anger management communication solutions in 3D is very important, because what we say in this is the importance of language. Diatribe, discussion, and dialogue. The diatribe is a statement of loss. In a statement of loss, you can't come up with a solution. You're just expressing your loss. Discussion is a chance for you to enumerate your concerns regarding your loss status. And a dialogue is where you begin to create an intimate space where you begin to accommodate prior to a solution to a problem, or the actual starting of a solution to a problem. So we continued with phase 1. The importance of the beloved community in establishing those intimate space in order to manage loss. I mean, every time I drive around this country, I'm just amazed at the beloved community. 7-Eleven, the bakeries, the banks, that intimate space that we've created for each other. Safety, cops, teachers, police officers, the president, the people who run our school boards, the people who are our Congress people, who are involved in creating that space that we can live in and thrive. I'm just always amazed by these folks. And so basically, ascesis is as by Foucault's definition, is the care for self. As one evolves and consolidates one's own identity, being able to recognize one's duty and one's routines and habits in maintaining the beloved community. Now, asceticism has different definitions. For a Christian, asceticism is being able to understand what God is and what God wants from us in terms of duty, habits, and routines. With our loss and grief diagram and transcendency, ascesis is really about maintaining the routines and habits of other people in the beloved community as they subserve safety, security, support, and service. Okay? So, again, we talk about Christian asceticism, ascesis, and so forth, the importance of being and becoming, the importance to realize that as a human being, just to exist is to be nothing, because you're always going to be defined by the other. And a lot of times when you're defined by the other in terms of their ethic speech, you're nothing. By definition, you're nothing. People can damage you, destroy you, belittle you, make you a nothing. So the whole idea is to move from being just existing to actually working to being and becoming. And you do that in conjunction with others in the beloved community in maintaining their routines and habits, which facilitates you in what you are doing in order to maintain that kind of transcendent space, that ethical transcendent space, and where you can take care of each other. So, ascesis informs duty. It informs routines and habits for others in the beloved community. It creates the structure by which people can thrive and survive. Now, ascesis, by definition, is the removal of self from the center of one's own existence. I am always amazed at people who view the world through their own prism. It's all about them. It's one of the worst things that can happen to you as a human being. But I understand it. I totally understand it. You're dealing with a world where people minimize you, destroy you, damage you, and so sometimes the only way you can survive is to pump yourself up.
Exactly.
And so sometimes I'm very leery about how you do this. But part of the conscious development that you have to achieve is the understanding that you're not the center of your own world. God is. And so sometimes it's okay just to give it up to that, to accept and to give it up. It is structural. It is structural. Maintaining the routines and habits of others is very, very important. It is important to have that space, that intimate space, is because the only way you can manage your losses. Okay, so again, ascesis is in the service of the beloved community in establishing routines and habits, which provides the structure in order to thrive in the beloved community. Again, transcendency in the beloved community subserves safety, support, service, and security. It's about establishing relationships with each other based on transactional agency and aesthetic intimacy. Now, self and identity informs choice. Again, choice is about freedom. Everything that we do here is about choice and freedom. The question now becomes, who owns our choices? We own our choices. We own our choices. God has given us total freedom. We own our choices. Practicing this helps us to refine our skills and to consolidate some knowledge. But at some point, we have to trying to acquire more and more knowledge about different things, and we have to begin accepting and supporting each other in the beloved community. Now, one of the big things in terms of choice of ascesis versus austerity. Now, one of the big things that's been ongoing in the worldwide global economy is this construction about austerity. Now, austerity is kind of a self-sacrifice that's imposed on people by their culture or their government. In America, it falls into that frame of revanchism, GOP revanchism, which is kind of a Fox conservatism, because they don't really believe in government. Government is really not what they're interested in. They're interested in taking the organs of power in order to damage certain people, like the 47% or different groups. So these are revanchists. So as a result of who owns the austerity, who owns the ascesis, if it's owned by the culture and the government, a lot of times it leads to some very, very unfortunate kind of consequences. So American revanchism talks about reducing taxes on the job creators, not taxing them. So you have the laboratory of the states in America, where you have a wonderful 8-year history of what happened in Kansas, and you compare what happened in California. In California, they raised taxes, and the state exploded. It blossomed. In Kansas, they cut taxes, and they lost their bond ratings. Towns that required public investment are now closing. Schools are closing. And so you had this example of austerity in the American laboratory of states. You have the example of Kansas versus California. Some of the consequences of austerity has been lead in water, and the long-term consequences of lead in water, where you end up reducing the IQ points of kids who have been exposed to this kind of regimen. You have public shaming of welfare recipients. I was in the grocery market the other day, and I was behind a guy who was trying to buy a soda and a bag of chips with one of the cards that the government gives you to buy groups, EBT cards. And the guy had all of his groceries there, and the woman told him, "You can't get this, you can't get that." And the guy was like about a 40-year-old man. And he looked around like this, and all of a sudden he says, "Okay, that's all right. I'm not going to take anything." And he went and he said to his wife, "Let's go." And they walked out of that store. Public shaming of welfare recipients. Criminalization of the poor. Ferguson, Missouri. They want to cut taxes, but they want to criminalize an entire population by using traffic tickets and the courts in order to raise revenue in Missouri. Now, this is just an example of who owns the austerity. What we're saying here is that ascesis should be owned by the individual, not shown by the government, or shouldn't be owned by the culture. From a historical point of view, we talk about historicism, and one of the things that you got to understand about history, history is usually organized by myths dressed up as truths. And this is something that we learned from David Hume, who talked about being skeptic about everything. People love to talk about the important, the objective. There's even a school of American philosophy by the Ayn Randians who talk about objectivism, that, it exists because that's the way it exists, that's the way it should exist. People are poor because they're poor. And so a lot of it is history is sometimes organized by myths that are dressed up. These people are inferior. One of the things that's very interesting I find is that when the Romans conquered Britain, some of the Romans thought that the Brits were stupid, were not that smart as the Romans. That was the going conceptualization. If you know anything about history, you understand the Holy Roman Empire and in the 9th and 10th century, the term slaves, when people talk about slaves, they think in terms of blacks and the Caribbean experience of slaves. But the people who gave that term slaves were Slavs, because the German kings enslaved massive amounts of white people, the Slavs. And were selling these Slavs on the markets in Ireland and in Paris and in France. So the original construct, the etymological root of slave is Slavs. And so history is very interesting because people don't understand what history would suggest. But a lot of times history is really myths dressed up as the truth. Again, this goes to the point here that knowledge is important, but it is not dispositive. At some point, you have to try seeking knowledge, and you have to accept things as they are, and you have to begin practicing and taking care of people. You must move from bargaining to acceptance, and this is the skeptic's position. Now, again, acceptance leads to the depressed position where there's an acknowledgement that you have to create that intimate space in order for people to thrive in the community. So, this becomes very important. One of the things about historicism is that ages, epochal ages, sunset, things come to an end. And one of the wonderful terms that came out of some of the reading I've done recently on ascesis, at least by the series of lectures that Foucault did in the early 80s, in America and in Paris, he talked about the importance of ascesis in terms of understanding, by practicing, understanding where you are in this process. And McGushan talks about ethopoiesis, historicism and poetry. Now, poetry is language. Eidetic language and speech subserves and maintains intimate spaces. This goes back to what I've been saying about speech, etic speech, eidostic speech, eidetic speech. Speech is important. The poetry of a particular epoch survives as the intimate, memorialized in eidetic speech of that period. For example, life, liberty, and happiness. Wonderful poetry. Life, liberty, and happiness, but it means something. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their entrances and their exits, and each man in his time plays many a part. Poetry, Shakespeare. Intimacy is an organizing principle which does not sunset. It does not sunset, as does the organizing principles of myths seen in discursive normalization, which does sunset. And so I was always interested in terms of ascesis, looking at the experience of Napoleon Bonaparte, and Lycurgus. Now, Lycurgus was a great lawmaker of the ancient city-state of Sparta. Now, ascesis of Napoleon's army led to the Napoleonic Codes, which expanded liberty And even to this day, the Napoleonic codes are celebrated in the world. Then you want to be able to compare and contrast him to Lycurgus, whose cultural austerity led to a Spartan police state. Because this is a situation where Lycurgus created a militarized state where kids had to begin military service at age 7. You couldn't become a citizen unless you were of Spartan, you were Spartan birth. And military service became very, very important. As a matter of fact, they didn't like them being too exceptional. The house had to be of a certain size, of a certain shape. You had to fit a certain regiment of what you can and can't do. So Sparta became a police state. And eventually it sunset because it just couldn't survive. Because the language, the poetry, the ethnopoiesis of Sparta simply is not something we recognize in terms of giving agency in life to the beloved community. In Sparta, you had huge segments of the population that were treated awfully. They could be murdered, they could be killed, they could be gotten rid of in ways. And so this becomes very important in understanding that language, ascesis, language becomes very, very important in creating intimate spaces where you can thrive and do well. So that's the end of that lecture. And going forward, John, we're going to be looking at different aspects of it. We're going to deconstruct it and look at. So next time we're going to be looking at status, and we're going to be looking at terrorism and what that portends.
Terrorism and
That's terrorism, and gun violence and things like that. And we'll talk about that in terms of status. But it's not only that. There's so many things that could come under status, like austerity, shaming of people, who are poor, and various things like that. I mean, I never really experienced that before. You're going to a store with one of these pharmacies, and this guy had the card, and they told me he couldn't get a can of soda and some chips. I think it was can of soda and chips. I think that's what it was. But there's something he couldn't get.
Was it
because he was poor?
That told him that?
Yeah.
Was it a pharmacy?
It was a pharmacy. It was at a pharmacy. But it's the idea that you can shame people. But it's not only that. You mean drug testing the poor, where we know that from various studies that the poor don't use drugs more than other people do. But they decide they want to go drug test these folks because they can. They don't create that intimate space with folks in that kind of setting. So what do you guys think?
Oh, it's a lot to think about. What did you say, John?
I said good series. It's been a good series.
Yeah, so basic esquisse was the end point of that, and going forward, we're going to be breaking it down, looking specifically at loss and grief, and deconstructed it according to status, management, and recovery. Also, and again, this stuff is based on a lot of information that I use in my own practice, and a lot of it comes from Søren Kierkegaard, Piaget, Melanie Klein, Foucault, Vygotsky. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but it is something I've done for the last 10 years in trying to create this program.
Well, I feel that right now, I feel like I'm going through loss right now. I'm not sure which state I'm in, but when you were talking about the parts of it that help you cope with it, as far as intimacy, and the people in your life who support you through it, I thought that was, I can see myself that some of those things are lacking. I think I've made a routine and I have certain habits that I'm doing. I have my mate, I have my friend, I have Jordan's school.
So those routines and habits,
I really am not
managed. So what has fallen out for you, Don, in terms of your routine and habits? What has fallen out for you in terms of that structure that you needed in your life to manage your losses?
Well, I have no hobbies or interests.
You go to church?
I don't go to church.
You work.
I work.
Okay. You
Uh,
You have
I-
friends. You take support friends.
Well, I have a friend.
A friend.
A friend.
Yeah, good for you.
I have a friend, Pat, and I have a few other associates,
And of course, you're very important to your family.
and I'm important to my family. But I feel that I'm grieving right now. I feel like I'm grieving right now, and I'm wondering which way I need to move to get past it, because there's nothing else I can do but accept it. There's nothing else that I can do. I have no other choice, because
Acceptance.
how do I accept it?
So
How do
you
I
look at the
accept it?
diagram, and is acceptance important for management of loss?
Yes.
And so where does acceptance lead you to?
Grief.
It leads you to the depressed position. Acceptance can lead you to grief too. Put on your glasses. No, but acceptance, according to that diagram, you notice that those doors are closed. You know, for example, envy, skis, or power in a position. You can't access that door. You can't access it. So going from acceptance, you go to the depressed position, and we talk about the depressed position as being important because of the acknowledgement of the need for intimacy in your life.
The acknowledgement that I need these things.
Intimacy. That you need intimacy in your life.
Yes.
So what is intimacy?
Conversation, closeness to someone, being involved. What is intimacy?
Intimacy is an ongoing dialogue you have with other people about yourself and your life. Where people recognize what you need and are able to get out of themselves in order to support you in ways that are important in your intimacy. Being able to have money, food, people take care of you. I see your husband was very helpful in helping you bringing the
Yes, he
comidas
does
for us.
what
And
I
so he
need
created
done.
that intimate space for you to provide for us to do what we
Yes.
need to do.
Yes.
You know, I provide routines and habits for other people. I
You
provide
provide a
funds.
routine for me.
Yeah, you know, and so I one of the funny things that's happened to me in my life, you know, is some people said that I tried to manipulate them with money. I said, you know, and I always find that very funny because I wish somebody would try to manipulate me with money.
I know,
I
seriously.
mean, give me $10 for a cheeseburger, and I'd be very happy.
No, I could see where you provide a structure for me, a reason to get out of bed, give me things to do. You help me have goals for myself. Well, I'm going to do this tomorrow. I'm going to do this. I have this to look forward to. I have this coming up in 2 weeks.
To work
This
on.
is something that I have to do, because my life, whether you realize it or not, it circulates around Aubrey and
Jordan.
and my husband and Hannah and Denise.
And their spokes
and their lives and what's going on.
their lives.
And that's where my life is. When you've removed Jordan, Denise has removed herself because I have emptiness syndrome. Hannah is removing herself. So it's basically what I'm dealing with is me and my husband getting old together, along which I'm experiencing other losses as far as health.
Is getting old an
It should be
important?
wonder years. Now you guys get
Wonder
to really
years.
get to know each other without the distraction of children.
Disney has.
It's not distraction, it's a part of my life.
It's a routine.
These were my routines that Jordan would get up in the morning, that Jordan would go to sleep at night, that Jordan would eat at certain times, that Jordan had certain games. And my life was built around, like, I had a big loss since Jordan's not going to basketball. That was my Saturday and Sunday. That was a big part of your dealing with your daughter, that close and bonding time that you have with your daughter, going to those games and spending time with her.
Yeah, because it's like a familial thing. The whole family's involved.
The whole
Is
family's involved.
ascesis, as we described in the lecture, important in that process of maintaining other relations with people? Ascesis, being able to remove yourself from that in just supporting other people.
My problem is I'm not an observer. I'm part of, I consider myself part of it. And I have not been able to remove myself. That's one of the difficult things I'm having to do because I'm not a parent, I'm a grandparent. and the parents are the ones who are in control. That's another thing, loss of control, loss of any control over anything that's really going on. So having to give up control to the niece and the father, having to give up control with,
of your grandson.
of my grandson, these things.
The problem with it is that I think when you say removing yourself from the picture, that's difficult because every organism is invested in self-preservation naturally. It's just part of everything. So I think when you do that, that's why it's so hard, because naturally we are invested in self-preservation as an organism, every organism. That's why I think that's where the trouble is with that. And I think why it hurts so much, like with when you're losing, more so because it's so sudden. When you lose something, it basically disrupts your pattern, your routine.
Mm-hmm.
And we live in that. And humans have a fear, because we're blessed with the gift of a mind. We it's kind of hard to say, but humans are or have a fear of the unknown. So with that fear of the unknown, we basically will do
You don't
anything.
know what you're gonna do next.
And I think that's where all
Because your
these
life is.
we basically will do anything to
Maintain.
not be in that dark space of which is the unknown.
You don't know what's coming.
That's why I think the pain of loss is, like for an average person to be able to understand. That's why I think, and I just basically think it's the fear of the unknown, and all of these things that you're outlining. It seems like they're basically subconscious vehicles and things that we go through as people. But it's helpful because this helps us
Focus.
Yeah, this basically gives us like understanding of what's really going on with us as humans. That's the beauty of being a human being, is because, magically we're able to somehow understand ourselves, as a species, versus not being able to do that with any other species. No other species can do this.
Yeah. No, you brought up some very, very important points. I mean, there's nothing easy about this process. I mean, the truth of the matter is that as we're separated from God for a reason. That's because God gave us free will and choice, and we choose to separate ourselves because of our own narcissistic, secondary narcissism, our own selfishness, our own prosecutorial anxiety. We're trying to preserve something because we're somewhat fearful of this, fearful of that. And so we're always trying to figure out ways not to feel pain, not to feel lonely, not to feel separate. And we're always thinking of ways of having ourselves in the middle of everything. And because not to be in the middle of everything is to have a sense that we are not there. But in order to truly grow and understand and to have a conscious understanding of all of our choices, sometimes we do have to do that. That's not an easy thing to do. Sometimes when you make choices, a lot of times you make choices that it may seem to be hard for you, but if you don't separate yourself out and meditate and spend time by yourself and understand exactly what you're going through, sometimes you don't make good choices. Sometimes you just don't make good choices because you're so full of yourself and what your needs are and what your expectations are.
So is that's emotional then?
Well, it's natural. It's part of life. I mean, everybody wants to have a sense that they're going to be taken care of and that this is going to happen and everything's going to make sense. But a lot of times you do things that are self-sacrificing as a parent that I don't understand. So, for example, I give you an example for you. My mother.
Mm.
My mother. Now, I love my mother. Okay? And she's not perfect. My mom, I told her that and she was very upset when I told her she's not perfect. but that was her own stuff. That was her own stuff. But she was able to sacrifice for me in ways that don't think I can sacrifice for anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
My father has done things for me that I don't think I have the capacity to do for anybody else. And it's not that I can't, but I have not been challenged to do that. We all think that we have challenges and we think we are having this or that struggle, but we don't have anything. You know, we read. I mean, it's tough, but it's not that overwhelming. Right.
I have no problem
One of the
with
things.
sacrificing.
No, one of the things I talk about frequently right now is what happens in a lot of my programs. There's a lot of something called prosecutorial anxiety. We've talked about prosecutorial anxiety forever in this program here, and it's the idea that each one of us is occupying a deck of the Titanic. What's going to happen to the Titanic?
It says,
Saints,
It's going to end, right?
along with everything
Now,
else.
how do we accommodate to living on the deck of the Titanic, our own deck of the Titanic? How is it possible to live on the deck of the Titanic knowing that eventually the ship is going to sink?
get a life jacket.
Denial.
Push everybody out the boat. No, they did.
The only way you accommodate to living on the deck of the Titanic is by creating an intimate space on the deck of the Titanic.
As you
And
prepare to go down.
and what happens is that no, but you don't know when you're going to go down, but you will go down.
Are you talking about death?
Death, whatever. But when you're living on the deck of the Titanic is going to sink.
Sooner or
But
later.
the truth of the matter is that we're all living on the deck of the Titanic. But some of us are like sitting there playing pinochle and drinking beer and having a good time and dancing and going
And
to
some people are
Mr.
running
World.
around crazy.
And some are running around crazy. And there's a difference between depressive anxiety and prosecutorial anxiety. You know, prosecutorial anxiety is experienced by people whose routines and habits have been disrupted. They don't have an intimate space on the deck of their Titanic. And so they're running around trying to figure out what they're going to do with this space. And if you just think of yourself as being in the middle of this space, then you feel prosecutorial anxiety all of the time. But if you see yourself as there to facilitate other people's lives and helping other people along the way, guess what? You assume depressive anxiety as opposed to prosecutorial anxiety, and you create an intimate space where you're living on the deck of the Titanic, that the Titanic becomes what? Livable, enjoyable, meaningful,
Because you have a purpose.
because you have a purpose.
That's what makes my life meaningful right now, that I have a purpose. If those purposes were removed, I don't know.
So who is responsible for those purposes in your life? Who is responsible for that?
The people who I'm intimate with, or am I
You'd be
responsible for that?
responsible.
You have choice. It's you. It's entirely you. It's entirely you. It's God's giving you total freedom. It's entirely you.
It doesn't feel like it's me.
It is,
It doesn't feel like it's me.
You know, every now and then I have this fantasy of living in the south of France. And I'm one telephone call away from making that call to move to the south of France.
Wow.
I'm learning French. Did I tell you I'm learning French?
How good are you?
Not very good. but basically you realize that intimate space that is important for you. I'm not the author of my own life. I wish I was, but I'm not.
Aren't you responsible for your?
I'm responsible, but that's the point. It's about rational choice. You know, choice is choice, but choice could be based on your aesthetics, eidetic speech, I go here, there, and everywhere, or it could be based on eidetic speech, cultural understanding, or it could be based on eidetic understanding of what is it you need to do in order to create that space, that intimate space for the world. Now, one of the subtexts for all of this stuff that I'm doing here is because I believe that I would like to create a space where I could help out
Yeah.
and help people, and sometimes it's
That's
the
when you
only thing that gives me a sense of joy. You know, I swear, if I'm lying, I'm dying. I was driving down the Cajon Pass and it began to drizzle. As it begins to drizzle, what did I begin doing?
Singing?
Huh?
Singing?
I began crying.
Really?
I said, "Thank you, God. I
It's
needed
a
that."
rain.
It was just
Oh.
drizzles.
Yeah, but it was something.
I said, I need this. You know, because for me, rain is about intimacy.
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't care who the people are I'm with. My memory is of rain and intimacy. Because when I was a kid, that's the eidetic representation, language-wise, for intimacy for me. Because when it was raining, my mom had a great food meal.
Warm.
There was warmth, there was laughter, there was kindness, there was caring. And for me, that's the proxy variable for me.
You're all in one space.
It's all one space.
Yeah.
And so for me, when it rains, and I'm in a space where I feel all of those things, I have memory of that intimate space as a kid. And it's the only time I feel that comfortable. Now, we've talked about this in our discussions. We talk about the music, the importance of culture. When you compare real life to culture, sometimes real life is very pale in comparison. And actually the Greeks had a term for that. It's mimesis, antimimesis. It's the idea that sometimes either life follows art or art follows life. But in both cases, it's both a teaching tool. But a lot of times, I am sitting in a space where I'm listening to a piece of music, and I'm so happy. I can't remember another time another human being made me as happy as that moment when I'm sitting here listening to that music. And we've all experienced that. And for me, it's poetry. It's about identification. It's about art. And it's a huge part of who we are. So when we talk about ethopoiesis, we're talking about art. We're talking about poetry. We're talking about how human beings begin to understand where they are. So, for example, when I was a kid, I learned this little ditty. 30 days in September, April, June, and November. All the rest have 20. All the rest have 31 except for February, which has 28 in regular and 29 in leap year. Now, that came from my culture. I learned that when I was about 4 or 5 year old. And at my age, 60, I'm still repeating that. Now, I always get a fun out of the kids, the American kids I deal with, who, when they're trying to figure out the number of days and when they do something with their hands.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I say, suppose you lost your knuckle, or you
lose a month.
But speech, eidetic speech, 30 days in September, April, June, and November. Speech is very important. One of the things that I realized about speech is that a lot of times, one of the things that, I term it classic rap versus rap that's not classic. There's such a thing as a classic rap because it was verbal. It was verbal. It conveyed a story. And you listen to music from the music we grew up with. It told a story. It had language. It had form. It had content. Now, the music of today, it's all rambling and it's about pushing and this and that, and it makes no sense. It's not very intimate.
The folk music.
When we talk about this, we talk about 2 lectures ago. We talk about what's his name, John Denver. Any song. You fill up my senses, like a walk in the forest. I mean, it created memory.
They have to go up to the
Anyway, so that's that. Thank you, guys. The end of story.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You want to take a sandwich with you? Take a sandwich with you?
Sure. Thank you.
Denise, take a sandwich.
When on those days now,
Jennifer, you want to take a
see the
sandwich?
rain, you feel the rain, and you feel those memories and the warmth.
I haven't seen you
Are
for a
you
while.
getting those now from the Lord?
Oh yeah, but you see, I have memory. I have memory.
Yeah, but I mean, are you now feeling the warmth of God now?
Oh yeah,
Is that
I feel it every day though. I feel it every day when I talk to people. I do.
She has to pick up Jordan for football. He's in football right now.
nice meeting you?
No, it's through Ratchet Cucamonga.
Okay, so I gotta go to my office and sign some checks because I want to distribute before I go.
Okay, so video, then just do a montage.
Montage, and so we can discuss it. I mean, basically, I talk a lot, and what I want to do, I want to stop talking so much.
Okay.
Because basically, I think I can convey the information about various things by simply examples You know, for example, the quick start idea. You know, the whole idea that ethic speech is quick start ethic. It's intimate space. So
Yeah.
it's like getting up and running fast as you possibly can. You know, and that's ethic. That's an ethic quick start speech to start intimacy. And I think that it works in terms of teaching
Okay.
construct.
I plug in a record player. Now I'm a DJ.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah, quick start. You have a sense of intimacy.
Right.
So let me go to my office.
These are some great photos of you when you were in New York.
Thank you, man. But
Everybody's eating up everything.
I gotta go right.
Okay, that's good.
You enjoy
Thanks for
yourself
coming.
right there?
So was it okay?
Oh, it was great. I
Thank
liked
you.
it. It was very educational.
Thank you. Good seeing you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
was good.
We need more of
That
them.
was- Are you gonna be all right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did anyone, anything to drink before I take them back?
Does anybody want to drink or chips?
Shit, nah. It's unhealthy
No
for
more
me.
Cheetos? No Cheetos?
Quit bribing me.
Ah.
I'm just taking this. Is this, do you want this?
It's okay though.
No,
We're
there's
good.
no.
It's okay. I have to drive away. So it's gonna be
So now I'm gonna be stuck with this?
You don't want it?
No.
Okay.
It's your turn tonight.
Alright, I'll take it.
It's just that people ate more than normal.
Oh, that's fine.
You know what's funny? I was just reading.
Yeah, we did.
That's good though.
That's a good thing. It didn't go to waste.
See, my waist.
A lot of us, we look up to people who were around in like the ancient history. Like, you know, if you do your
Francisco,
homework-
you gonna let me ride with you?
Only if you don't mind me going to the store.
Which store you going to?
Sprouts.
Where's that?
That's pretty close by. That is what, by Day Creek and Foothill, somewhere there.
Okay. You just gonna run in?
Huh? Yeah, I'm not gonna like spend forever there.
Okay.
Got a few things.
Take drink and
Okay.
baseline.
Need to buy some bread. Run out of bread.
Oh, okay.
Bread and I don't know, some orange juice.
But a lot of the people who
Alright,
we
you
look
think
up
they
to
give
as
us a
heroes,
You know what?
they make mistakes too. Well, we all do as human beings, but it's funny because
History gets modified as
Yeah.
no, but let me tell you something though, because Bill Clinton, well, you already know the Monica Lewinsky
Yeah.
thing, but
They
I'll
focus
go,
so much
No,
on
but
it.
I'll go even deeper than that.
That's
You know
good
who
idea.
wasn't really a saint,
Yes, I'm
believe
gonna
it or
put the
not?
rest.
And a lot of people look up to him. He had his own day, but he did some screwed up things in his past too. Martin Luther King. I mean, I read like, you know, the ballad of Martin Luther King. That
A lot of
dude-
the good people in history did some.
no, but Martin Luther King though, that dude, like, and it's like there's photos too. It's funny, like if you like, you know, it shows him flipping off the media. Like this was when in his younger days when he was like 21, 22. Like,
Okay, well he was learning, he was improving.
What do you want sandwich?
but I mean,
It's gone.
Can I give him my sandwich?
but you said a lot of them though in the older days. You said.
Most people, because we end up focusing on just some of their accomplishments versus their failures
And their flaws.
and their flaws, exactly, and they
And-
become glorified, and we start forgetting about some of the bad deeds they did, and so we only start seeing the good things.
I think I gave him my
mean,
food.
He wasn't, like I said, I'm not saying he was a bad person, but what I'm saying is
So if you see a
they
plate-
left out a lot of stuff about him. They only want you to see, they only want you to know what, you know, the
So you're gonna take that,
positive.
right?
Yeah.
Oh, exactly. I've noticed that. Let's start disconnecting some of the stuff. Even though it
And I
says that
think-
it's
and I tell you
processing
this-
something,
And to tell you
preparing the
truth,
stream for
I
playback.
think the same thing with Barack Obama. There's lots of stuff unknown about Barack that just hasn't
Get these signs from downstairs.
Oh yeah, the easel.
that just hasn't been unleashed yet. You know.
And also, when they want to like slander someone, they just focus on all their bad deeds and all their failures.
Exactly.
Like, what about all the good things they did? They did lots of good things too. They're like, man, they only did bad. I need to separate some of the things from here, like the camera stuff and whatnot. Just go separate from the TV. Give me one moment to separate.
You know who else was shady too, though?
Who?
Abraham Lincoln. He was cool.
Well, supposedly
put
he
in-
even owned slaves or owned a slave or something like that, right? I've heard stories like that.
Yeah. He was cool. I mean, he invested a lot, but he was kind of shady too.
All in one.
It's just goes to show, you know, history just gets modified and, you know, gets on display for the respected audience.
But they're good dudes, though. You know what I'm saying? They're gonna be well known. I'm just saying,